When you think about how medicines are made, it's easy to picture these huge, almost old-fashioned factories, right?
Right.
Giant vats, lots of separate steps.
Yeah, that's the classic image. Big steel tanks, chemists and lab coats moving things from one stage to the next.
But if you actually look at the cutting edge today, especially for making the active ingredients, the APIs, it's, well, it's starting to look quite different.
It really is. And while those, traditional big batch methods aren't disappearing overnight,
Right.
the real energy, the momentum, especially in API production, is definitely shifting towards something much more integrated,
Hmm.
continuous
Yeah,
processing.
exactly. And that's what we're really going to dig into today. We're focusing on these trends, this evolution towards continuous processing for APIs.
hmm
And we've got some great source material touching on things like flow chemistry, these new chemical tools, and also just broader changes in how drugs are developed.
And when you pull those threads together, you really see how these advancements are kind of converging. They're making continuous API manufacturing less of a maybe someday idea and more. Well, it's happening now.
Right. So our mission for this deep dive really is to unpack what this continuous processing trend is all about. Like, what is it?
Okay.
Why is it gaining traction now? What are the upsides? How are the regulators looking at it? And, what are the roadblocks? Why isn't everyone doing it already?
Good questions.
We want this to be your shortcut, basically, to understanding a pretty major shift in the pharma world.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Fundamentally, what is continuous processing for APIs?
Well, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's a way of making the drug substance, the API, without stopping.
Okay, nonstop, unlike the old way.
Exactly. Traditional batch processing is like baking individual cakes or batches of cookies. You do step one, finish, move everything to step two, finish that, and so on. Set quantities, distinct stages.
Right, makes sense, like different pots and pans for each step. Precisely. Continuous processing, though, it's more like a constant stream. Materials flow seamlessly through equipment that's all connected.
Ah, so maybe like one of those, big industrial bakeries with the conveyor belts where the dough goes in one end and bread just keeps coming out the other.
That's actually a pretty good analogy, yeah. For APIs, it means the chemical reactions, the purification steps, everything happens as the material moves continuously through the system.
No stopping, no starting, no moving big batches between tanks.
Correct. It's designed as an uninterrupted flow from raw materials to the final API, or at least a significant portion of the process.
Okay, got it. That paints a clear picture. So what's pushing the industry this way? What are the kind of the driving forces behind this shift right now?
There are several key things happening at once, really. A big one is the rise of enabling technologies, and flow chemistry is probably the star player here.
Low chemistry, yeah, that definitely popped up in the materials. Can you break that down for us? What is it in
Yeah.
simple terms?
Sure. So instead of doing a reaction in a big tank, flow chemistry means you're doing it inside a continuously flowing stream, usually within narrow tubes or channels.
Okay, tiny tubes instead of big vats.
Often, yes, or at least much smaller reactor volumes. And the key benefit is incredible control. You can manage temperature, pressure, reaction time much more precisely than in a huge batch reactor.
And why is that so important?
While that precision opens doors, it means you can potentially run reactions that might be, let's say, a bit hazardous or difficult to control if you tried to scale them up in a massive batch.
Ah, okay. This connects to something else. I saw advancements in specific chemical reactions, like new ways of doing oxidation. The TempoBab system was mentioned as an alternative to older methods,
Exactly, that's a perfect example.
like chromium trioxide or Desmartin, which I gather has some safety issues.
They absolutely can. Chromium reagents have toxicity concerns, and Desmartin can be energetic, meaning potentially explosive when you use large amounts. Not ideal.
Right.
The tempo-based system is seen as much greener, safer, and often gives better results. Now, combine that inherently safer chemistry with the precise control of a flow reactor.
And you get even more control and safety.
Precisely. The small volumes in flow chemistry drastically reduce the risk if something were to go wrong with an energetic reaction. You can manage heat incredibly well. Plus, it integrates much more smoothly into a continuous downstream process like purification.
The new chemistry and the continuous flow technology work hand in hand. That makes a lot of sense. You also mentioned something called quality by design, QBD. How does that fit in?
Yes, QBD is a huge factor. It's a philosophy the FDA and other regulators really champion. The idea is to build quality into the product and process from the very beginning, not just test it at the end.
Proactive quality control.
Exactly. And continuous manufacturing is almost tailor-made for QBD Because you have this continuous flow, you can implement real-time monitoring. Sensors can track critical parameters constantly.
Like temperature, pressure, concentration.
All of that. And if something starts to drift, the system can potentially correct it automatically in real time. This gives you a much deeper understanding and control over what actually impacts the final API quality, way beyond what you typically get with batch testing.
So it's not just about making stuff faster or cheaper. It's fundamentally about making it better and more consistently.
That's a huge part of the motivation, yes. Consistent high quality is paramount.
Okay, that leads perfectly into the next question. Let's really drill down on the potential benefits. What are companies hoping to gain by making this switch?
There's a whole list, really. First off, efficiency and cost savings. Continuous processes, because they're so controlled, often give higher yields. Less starting material wasted on side reactions.
More bang for your buck, basically.
Pretty much. And less waste generally, which is good environmentally too. Plus, you avoid all the stopping, starting, heating, cooling cycles of batch, which can save energy. I saw one estimate suggesting yield boosts of 15–20% for some complex APIs. That's significant money.
Wow, yeah. Higher yields, less waste, lower energy. Sounds good. What about the drug itself, the quality?
That's another major one. Better product quality and consistency. That tight control we keep talking about, it generally leads to a more uniform API, fewer impurities.
Which should mean safer, more reliable medicines for patients, right?
That's the ultimate goal, absolutely. More consistent quality batch to batch, or rather moment to moment in a continuous process.
And safety during manufacturing. You touched on handling hazardous reactions.
Yes, safety is a big plus. These are often closed systems, pipes, enclosed reactors, so workers have much less exposure to potentially nasty chemicals or potent APIs.
Less manual handling, fewer open transfers.
Exactly. And as we said, managing those tricky energetic reactions becomes much safer in the controlled, small volume environment of flow chemistry setups.
Okay. And the last potential benefit mentioned was faster development times. How does that work?
Well, the idea is that optimizing a process in a small-scale flow system can be quicker than doing endless batch experiments. You can change conditions rapidly and see the results almost instantly.
Ah, faster learning cycles.
Right. And scaling up a continuous process, in theory, can be more predictable than scaling up a batch process. You might add more identical reactor lines in parallel, rather than designing a whole new massive tank. This could potentially speed up getting new drugs from the lab to the factory.
So, potentially shorter timelines to get medicines to patients. Okay, these are all really compelling advantages, but what about the regulators, the FDA, EMA, others? Are they on board with this?
That's obviously critical, and the good news is, yes, generally they are very supportive.
Really? Why?
Because they see the potential for improving drug quality, reliability, and manufacturing robustness. That aligns perfectly with their mission to protect public health.
So they're encouraging it then?
They are. They've issued guidance and actively engaged with companies exploring continuous manufacturing. They recognize it's a way to modernize the industry.
Are there different rules, though? If you switch from batch to continuous, do you have to follow a whole new set of regulations?
Not entirely new rules, but the emphasis shifts. The core principles, like good manufacturing practices, GMP, still apply, absolutely.
Okay, the basics are the same.
Right. But with continuous, you really have to demonstrate a deep understanding of your process. Remember QBD, you need robust process controls and real-time monitoring to prove you're consistently making quality product.
So more data, more process understanding needed.
Definitely. You need to show, which parameters are critical and that you can control them continuously. The specific guidance is still evolving as everyone gains more experience, but the direction is clear. Process understanding and control are key.
Okay, so regulators are supportive, but they expect a high level of sophistication. Which kind of leads us to the challenges, because clearly not everyone has switched yet. What's holding things back?
Yeah, it's not a simple flip of a switch. There are some pretty significant hurdles. First and foremost is the upfront cost.
The investment.
Big time. You often need totally new equipment, maybe even new facilities or major retrofits. That's a huge capital expenditure compared to just using existing batch reactors.
And it's not just the hardware, right? You need the people who know how to use it.
Absolutely. You need specialized expertise to design, run, maintain, and troubleshoot these more complex integrated systems. That means training or hiring, which adds to the cost and complexity.
Okay, so cost and expertise. What about the actual science? Could you just take any old batch recipe and run it through a tube?
Rarely that simple. That's another major challenge. Process development. Adapting chemistry that was developed for batch conditions to work well in a continuous flow setting can take a lot of R&D effort.
Why is it so different?
Things like reaction speed, how well things dissolve, mixing efficiency, potential for solids to clog narrow channels, they all behave differently in flow. You often need to fundamentally re-optimize, sometimes even reinvent the chemistry.
So significant technical challenges in just making the chemistry work continuously.
For sure. And then there's the monitoring and control piece we talked about.
Right, the real-time aspect.
Implementing and validating those sophisticated sensors and control systems. The PAT, process analytical technology, is technically demanding and expensive itself. You need to prove they work reliably all the time.
Makes sense.
Ah.
You also hinted that even with regulatory support, navigating that landscape can still be tricky.
It can be. Because it's newer, the specific expectations might still be solidifying. Companies might feel there's a bit more regulatory uncertainty compared to the well-trodden path of batch manufacturing. Good communication with agencies is vital, but it adds another layer.
Okay, and one last thing. With everything connected in one long stream, doesn't that introduce new kinds of risks? Like if one part fails.
That's a very sharp point. Risk assessment is crucial.
Well,
In batch, if one batch fails, you lose that batch. In continuous, a problem early on could potentially propagate and affect a lot more material before you catch it if your control systems aren't perfect.
so you need really robust failure detection and mitigation plans.
Absolutely paramount. You need to understand failure modes deeply and have strategies in place to handle deviations quickly and effectively.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've seen this clear shift towards continuous API manufacturing, pushed by tech like flow chemistry and the whole quality by design philosophy.
Mhm.
The potential upsides, efficiency, quality, safety, maybe speed are really attractive. Regulators are generally on board, seeing the benefits too.
Right, but it's not without its challenges.
Definitely not. Big investments needed, tricky process development, complex control systems to implement, evolving regulations to navigate, and new kinds of risks to manage. It's a major evolution.
It really is a fundamental rethink, not just a tweak. It's about changing the whole paradigm of how these critical ingredients are made, aiming for a step change in performance.
Absolutely. And hopefully, for everyone listening, this deep dive has given you a clear, concise handle on this important shift. It's hitting those aha moments without getting bogged down.
Hopefully demystified it a bit.
Yeah. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. As this continuous manufacturing becomes more common, what might that mean for us? Could it actually impact the cost or availability of medicines down the line?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it?
Or, thinking about all the automation and control involved, what kind of skills will the next generation of pharmaceutical scientists and engineers need? Definitely something to ponder.
Yeah, it raises big picture questions about cost, access, and the future workforce in pharma. It goes beyond just the factory floor.
Indeed. And hey, if this has sparked your interest, maybe dig a bit deeper into flow chemistry itself, or check out what the FDA or other agencies are publishing on continuous manufacturing. There's plenty more to explore.
Always more to learn.
That's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep asking questions.